So welcome to this, the first in a series of webinars that we're putting on around public sector recruitment, particularly helping public sector organisations ensure that their recruitment efforts are more inclusive and that they achieve lower cost per outcome or lower cost per quality application. This is the first in the series, and we're going to address a range of topics at a fairly high level. Future events will get into more detail. So we'll be looking today at some of the challenges facing public sector workforce recruiters, some examples of relatively pioneering techniques, and some tactics which we see emerging to replace less efficient tactics. Now, this is a very complex subject area. There is so much to cover, and you, as public sector recruiters, will have many, many choices to make. So we're trying to give you the distillation of our experience so that you can focus on doing fewer things better and maybe stop doing things that aren't working. We're a public sector dedicated advertising agency. We've run over 600 plus recruitment campaigns, and we help public sector recruiters with user experience, with online targeting, and basically reducing the cost per quality application, whilst also delivering sufficient volume of applications for whatever roles you're recruiting for. Now, being this, we have a relatively unique viewpoint on multiple campaigns. This is an example of us being able to benchmark over 40 different councils' foster care recruitment. But what it means is we can see not only the average picture, but help people understand where there might be challenges. Now, common challenges that we hear spoken when we're speaking to clients are ensuring that the people you want to recruit know about the positions, so awareness amongst the target audience, and also not wanting to exclude audiences from having the opportunity to apply. There are also challenges around perception around organisations, perception around the careers that people might have. There are also vast challenges around user experience. When people land, there are constraints on content, and there are sometimes processes which in themselves are a challenge for people to get over, particularly if you're trying to recruit people with learning difficulties or who don't have English as a first language. That is a real barrier and could be compounding some of those representation issues. There are also skill shortages and competition for specific skills. And then there's the ongoing challenge of resources in the public sector. Now, today, we're just going to zoom in on some of the awareness challenges, perception and user experience. We want to challenge you. Are your awareness activities, are where jobs and opportunities being posted in places where people can definitely access them? Do the people that are thinking of or considering working for you have a narrow perception of your organisation, of the career pathways you offer? And is the user experience that you're putting in front of them inaccessible? Will it drive frustration? Will it actually hurt your employer brand? These are things that many people are up against. And this isn't about naming or shaming anybody. We understand the challenges that people have, but this is really about giving good examples and sharing ideas, which hopefully after attending this webinar, you'll have something to help. So there is a tendency to use channels such as jobs boards, platforms like LinkedIn and so on. They may not be being accessed at the time that your job is posted by the people you want to see the job. So using inclusive channels, for example, this is the site Ghana Web, which we were able to place a recruitment campaign on in a certain geography where the client wanted to increase representation from the Ghanaian community in their organisation. So working out where people might be and then placing recruitment advertising there can be very powerful. It can also be very low cost versus traditional recruitment channels. So taking these approaches doesn't only achieve an inclusivity objective, but it also reduces cost. The central clip is a video created by someone, a young person who worked in the public sector, was then distributed on Snapchat, which is by far one of the most popular platforms and where young people actually are. And she's talking about her career pathway in a Scottish council. And that was used to drive sign-ups for young people to receive emails about apprenticeship opportunities. And then on the UX front, this is a social care recruitment microsite landing page, which has been translated into Urdu automatically by a large language model. So thinking about targeting certain communities, if English isn't their first language, and then using machine learning and large language models to improve user experience and to simplify it, we think is something that we're going to see a lot more of in the coming months and years. The moving away from national and recruitment focused channels towards national news titles means that we're often targeting people from, or reaching people from lower income backgrounds and targeting them where they are online. Then bringing them to a very simple light touch form, as you can see in this Dorset social care campaign, to collect just one or two bits of information that enable the organisation then to place multiple jobs in front of them. And you may be aware of regional public sector job sites, West Midlands Jobs, My Job Scotland, and there are many, using these sites as pools of people who are interested in careers in the public sector to then remarket to those sites, remarket to users that have been to those sites to place multiple potential jobs in front of people has proven to be incredibly effective. So rather than advertising to much larger audiences, advertising to people who are already interested in career pathways in the public sector. So these are just a few glances at subjects which we will go into more depth in the future. So we're now going to look a little bit at tactics, things that we can see emerging very, very quickly as being inclusive and delivering a strong return on investment. Search advertising we often position as a window into people's minds. People are very likely to go to a search with whatever they're thinking about. It almost is an extension of people's thought process. And what it enables us to do is to look into, in specific areas, what sort of jobs, what kinds of jobs are people looking for, and then wonderfully place a relevant advert next to those search results. But it helps us understand, for example, in certain areas, what proportion of people are searching for part-time jobs. And in adult social care, this is helping influence the sorts of roles that are put out there. So you're able to preempt demand and position your roles in front of people based on what your local population is actually looking for. This is also very powerful for identifying specific audiences and seeing what they're looking for, and then being able to place opportunities in front of them. So people from certain communities, people from certain backgrounds, for example, they may have convictions, long-term mental health problems, long-term physical health problems. Using search to find people who are interacting with content related to those things and positioning public sector jobs is a very powerful tactic. We're also seeing a dramatic increase in the use of owned channels. Councils are often the biggest the biggest media owner in their area, but they rarely make full use of their email channels, for example, which go to many tens of thousands of people. Also, the use of local jobs boards to advertise jobs, but also then to remarket to audiences, as I've mentioned earlier, is an incredibly low cost way of targeting people who are already in market. So millions of impressions, curated audiences mean that you can shift spend from relatively expensive, low performance platforms, national jobs platforms, trade titles, and so on, and start to invest it in your own channels, which creates not only lower cost per quality application, but the ability then to invest more in reaching more people more frequently, which also improves employer brand and improves cost per application. So some examples of this would be, for example, in locations where people are trying to attract older audiences back to professions or back into the workforce, using a mixture of national and local newspapers, remarketing to adult social care content on council websites, and maybe putting ads around people looking for part-time jobs or volunteering opportunities. These are tactics which we can see replacing maybe posting on LinkedIn, posting on Indeed, and so on. Or if you have maybe an apprenticeship scheme, using Snapchat in a similar way that was used in Scotland to deliver messaging and examples of career paths, and then encouraging young people to come and sign up to receive future posts in the future. Also, remarketing from school term dates pages will mean that you get parents and also young people, so triggering conversations on that front. So just to sort of sum this up a little bit, the trend we see with the constraints on the public sector and the types of roles and skills we need to address will be moving away from broadcast, non-measurable, probably quite expensive channels, less poster placement, less out of home, towards much more targeted channels like search, online display, and so on. Increased use of owned channels to deliver free awareness, and obviously a much more increased focus on not just digital placement, but digital user experiences that are improved on that front. In terms of the actual user experience itself, rather than taking people from clicking on an ad about a specific role to the full application, we might start to see people using much lighter touch user experiences that talk about career pathways more generally and give people choice around an array of different roles and nudge people towards those roles over time. We'll see less use, we think, of the slightly constrained .gov or solution provider owned sites towards small, simple sites featuring video and light data collection that work brilliantly on mobile, focusing much more on simple information that's really accessible, that's translated, and using large language models to make it much more accessible and much more easy for people to process and approach. So these are that's a very broad look over some of the things that we're going to talk about in this series. Upcoming events will focus on low cost and free channels, looking at medium-term skills requirement through upskilling and partnering with tertiary education, for example. Much more detailed look at the digital targeting capabilities of platforms, the use of remarketing, and the use of large language models and machine learning to generate vastly improved user experience. Engaging young adults on channels, but also in chatbot messaging experiences that will nudge them towards career paths in the public sector. And then looking at more inclusive approaches at the user experience front and also at the targeting front to improve representation, to make sure that the organizations you work for represent their populations much better. So thank you so much to everyone for joining today. If you have any questions about what we've just said, please drop me a line. You can scan that QR code to access my calendar. We will share this with anybody that registered, and please feel free to share this with colleagues if you think they might be interested in upcoming topics. And if any of the examples you've seen today you'd like some more detail on, please drop me a line. We'll automatically send you an invite to future events, and please again feel free to share those with colleagues. We will be in touch in the next few weeks with the next event. Look forward to seeing you there.